So this can. All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Whitney Diver McAvoy, the president and CEO of the Yountville Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us for our April webinar with Rob McMillan on the state of the wine industry here in Napa Valley and beyond. We have a really great presentation for you today, and I want to tell you a little bit about Rob before we jump to it. So as I think many of you know, Rob is one of the most respected business analysts, wine business analysts in the United States. He was the founder of the Silicon Valley Bank wine division that he pioneered and dedicating a full banking model to the wine industry in 1994. So I think if my math is right, for over 25 years, he's also authored the bank's widely acclaimed State of the Wine Industry Report, which has been described by the New York Times as probably the most influential analysis of its kind. And it's really wonderful that Rob takes the time out of his busy schedule to be here with us today. And of course, he's been named multiple times to the top 50 most influential people in the US wine industry business. So Rob, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. We will have time for questions at the end if you'd like to put your questions into the chat. If they are critical to what we're talking about at the moment, I will go ahead and interrupt Rob and ask those questions. Rob, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
No, thanks. I appreciate being here. Listening to my bio, you sound really good in your bio. You know why? Because I wrote it. It's true. Everybody writes their own bio. I guess I should be president or something. I don't know. So that sounds pretty good. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for having me again. I got about 40 slides, so I'm going to kind of go through them a little bit quick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the gloomy stuff. I think everybody's aware of where we are, but I have some surprise things that we'll go through. I think we have to still give a nod to what's going on. We still want to know, so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Let me see here. Got to get this to change. Give me a second. There we go. So here's what we're going to talk about. I got some survey responses. Most of them are from the State of the Industry report, but I do have kind of a few bonus slides that nobody's seen yet from the direct consumer survey that I'll pop in there. This is the stuff that we'll talk about. I got to fix one more thing. Sorry. How successful was your winery? I got to get rid of a bar on the top of my screen. Give me 1 second, please. No, I can't move it. Oh, well, I'll just deal with it. So this is the question. One of the questions we asked right away in the State of the Industry survey is how good was your year? It's just kind of a subjective view. It encompasses everything, and it's not defined. And as you can see, when you look at Napa's, relatively speaking, feeling pretty good. Virginia is in a different spot. They have a different business model. It's more restaurants, hotels. I would say it's the experience part that leads what they do out there more, and they have lower price points, and so they actually are growing. They have pretty good business model right now. But everybody else, Oregon's growing just a little bit still, but Napa's feeling pretty good about itself, as it should. Harvest quality, everybody felt pretty good about the quality. It was a good vintage. 92% said it was either good or excellent for Napa. Let's see if I can get that to work. There we go. So you can see that's the green is excellent, orange is good. Averages that kind of yellowish sort of a look, the 7%. So everybody felt pretty good about the harvest, and rightfully so. I think it really was a good harvest in my opinion. Yield is a little bit of a different place. So some say in Napa that there was, some say record low. But what I asked people to do is not include the notion of grapes that were unpicked, unharvested. And if you put that in there, it would look different. I think everybody is aware that the total yield was one of the lowest we've had in some time, but that's because of the unpicked. We ended up with this crush of wine grapes thing in the state. Now this is the state, and whenever we talk about industry or state averages, we have to remember that it includes two pieces. We have the high volume, low cost producers, and then we have us. And and maybe have Napa up here as luxury, but it's generally speaking, it's the lower part of the business that's still dragging us down. We're all experiencing the same headwinds, but we experience them in a little bit of a different light. So this is reflective of a lot of grapes that weren't picked in Lodi and Fresno, and I have a picture of Fresno. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is retail sales. In the top, you see bottle prices. I stopped at 30 to 50 because this is from Nielsen, and so it's a lot of this is grocery and convenience, most of it actually. So once you get above 30, the sample size gets so small that I don't really trust the information. Like 100 plus, that doesn't really resonate with me, so I cut that out. But you can see that the part that's doing relatively well is still that $12 to $30 mark. I think that's probably about right for me, the way I feel it. And even when you look down here, there's a teeny bit of growth. I don't know that I would call that a green shoot yet. I think it's probably a little early for that. One data point does not make a trend really. And then when you look across all of these numbers, so you can see the brackets around them. In most cases, we still have negative sales in most cases. So this is the way people think in Napa about supply of wine. 60% think it's imbalanced. Vis-a-vis, we have too much, and that's going to lead to the way people decide to buy grapes too, to the extent that they're buying grapes. It's well over 15%, and moderately in excess is 44%. Grape purchase intentions. So we ask people what are they going to do. This fits pretty close to what that last slide was. Napa, the green is planned to buy fewer grapes, and orange about the same. So you can see that very, very small people, when 16 not small people, they're probably this normal sized people, but a small number of people really are looking at buying additional tons. So that puts pressure on the grower again. Excuse me. Great prices. So when we ask, what do you think? This is always an interesting one because I'm asking wineries what they think is going to happen to grape prices, and if I ask growers, it's going to be different. But the wineries show up more in the they expect prices to drop, and I do think that's right. We're seeing prices drop on the grape side, and that's just part of the normal market correction. And it's in the end, it's gonna work out okay. It's just getting from here to there is a little bit painful for some. Napa at the bottom there. So this is the other side. I mentioned Fresno. I was up there. I like to go around. Once you guys will probably remember, maybe a decade ago, maybe a little longer now. China was becoming a big talking point, and so I went to China because I wanted to see what people were talking about. Same thing with Argentina and Italy and France and other places around the world. Republic of Georgia. I've been, all over just trying to get an understanding. And Fresno's kind of in our backyard, but I hadn't been there in probably 20 years. It's kind of outside of what I do, but I thought you'd be interested to see some of the pictures that I took down there. So this is kind of a good sign, if you will, and it's a good sign because that they've actually ripped, which means they know what they're doing with that acreage at this point. And you can barely see in the background, but there's those trees back there, pistachios, and so excuse me, they'll figure out something else. It's diversified farming area, so they'll find other things to plant there. But farming is difficult all the way around right now, and so not everybody's got things to plant. Here is an example of many spots that you'll see where it's this is a couple of weeks ago, and they haven't pruned. So they're not farming this. And you can see there's still grapes hanging from last harvest. So they didn't harvest last year, and they're not farming it this year, and they haven't ripped it. So that's a difficult thing. When we start hearing uh, information that Jeff Bitter from Allied Grape Growers talks about, removing vines, he's not talking about a per se as much, anyways, as Fresno in particular, and Lodi to some extent as well, the Central Coast as well, Monterey, etc. This is what you see on that same vineyard. This you would, when you look at it, you say, oh, good, green. It looks a lot better than the rest of it. But if you look really close, what you're really seeing is green leaves coming off of existing canes. So this wasn't pruned either. It doesn't have grapes hanging because this has been at least 2 or 3 years that this vineyard has been there and been unfarmed. So it's not a good sign because there's no revenue in that, and that's what a lot of the farmers are doing when they say that they are mothballing vineyards. This is one example of what that looks like. We don't see that up here really, and you do see some of this. This isn't a vineyard, but one of the vineyards I saw. We're so used to the way we do things, but they had contracted out a Muscat Alexandra vineyard that routinely gets at least 30 tons to the acre. And it's like, wow. I mean, if any of you guys get 30 tons to the acre, I'm going to tell somebody because that's not the way you farm here. So it's a little interesting just seeing, what the other side's doing. So this is year-end forecasts of what people thought about year-end revenue, and the folks that were taking the survey. This is last October. They had to guess for the rest of the year. It's the only way to do that and get decent data by January. But 2.8% for Napa, and that's pretty close overall. And I have the financial statement, so I can pull it together. I didn't look at Napa specifically, but when you look at the luxury and fine wine side, our growth rate in Q3 from financial statements was about -3%, but by year end we had an okay Q4, and by year end it got back to zero. So as they say, zero is the new up. I'm ready for that one to end though. So here's the DTC slides. I just threw those in about 15 minutes before this presentation. So here's tasting room purchases by region. And on the left is Napa, average tasting room purchase. It's still, rightfully up there pretty high. I think everybody here ought to be pretty excited about getting those kind of numbers. It's way outside the average, but, North Coast Napa Sonoma, it's world-class destination, world-class growing area, and that's what you ought to expect is getting the highest prices for specifically for Napa. This is one that put together yesterday. Actually, I started wondering what's happening to average bottle price against inflation. So these are average bottle prices. Now these come in from people that's they said, I asked them what is your average suggested retail price. So it's going to be different than what you see in Nielsen or some of the other things because people are taking an average and then I'm averaging those averages, and that's how we get to these numbers. But it still works from a directional standpoint, and so you can see in this that in these last 3 years, 22, 23, 24, everybody will remember the 21 to 22 growth. That was, 21 ended up being a really good year. 22, people were feeling good and they raised prices and they needed to because we had inflation. You can see the same thing in 23. We had inflation, and same thing in 24, and we have inflation now, and average prices kind of flattened. So that tells you that we're up against kind of a ceiling on what we can do with price. It's going to be hard to increase price, which is difficult when you have still an inflationary environment. And hopefully, we won't have too much of an inflationary environment. That news changes every day. So we'll have to just track that as we go along. This is another interesting slide that I just discovered literally 15 minutes before this speech. But everybody knows that visitation's down. It's down in Napa. It's down in all regions. I believe all regions right now. And when I was starting to go through the data, it was showing me that there's just about the same number of wineries that are growing in visitation as wineries that are shrinking. Now, total visitation is dropping. I have no doubt of that. But okay, well, how is that possible to have the same number of wineries that are growing or shrinking in visitation while we know the total is dropping? And so I figured it had to be the fact that the small wineries are still growing, and they are. So you got that $5,000 to $10,000 mark is kind of that in between state, and so I think it has probably to do with the way the smaller wineries are able to customize things more. They're probably just more attentive. It's a little bit more of maybe a down to earth experience in some respects, but they're probably more connected with the folks versus what we have above that, where we have very drilled down, professional, lined up experiences. And anyways, that's what we're seeing. So that's just a new discovery just this second. Alcohol beverage consumer. So what's going on there when you look at this slide? This is a customer spend per capita. And so what we've basically done is we've evened out everything so that you don't have distortions from populations, like boomers are big, millennials are big. So we've taken that out and equalized it. And what you see here is that the growth is still coming from the 40 to 70-year-old band. That's where all the growth is. Now on this slide here, what I tried to do this last year is I started to work on understanding how long this is going to last, and we'll go through a few slides about that, because that's an important concept. It's important that we get something close to it, because we have investments to make. I've had a few calls like this where a grower called me. And that's specifically what he wanted to know, is how long is this going to last? And he said, "Don't bullshit me." He says, I need to know this. And I said, "Well, you're not going to like the answer then." He says, "Well, are we going to recover in 25? And I said, "No, you're not." And he said, "Thank you, because I can't afford to spend all the rest of my savings." And so those are the reasons that we have to kind of be honest with ourselves. I want to present a happy, picture, but a positive picture. And there are a lot of positives, but I don't want to overinflate the news and just say everything's fine, because, then we can't fix what we don't see. So I started going at it from the standpoint of, let's see, what each of the age groups, have in preferences, because everybody drinks wine. Every single age group drinks wine, just one degree or another. So here once again, we see it's that 60 to 80-year-old group that drinks wine, prefers wine more so than others. And then in the 30 to 59, call it, group, it's a little bit more weighted toward beer and spirits. And then there's a bunch of other, and you can see the top of the 21 to 29, other is 20%, and it goes all the way down to almost nothing by the time you get to 80. That's that far right column. And that includes things like RTDs, and RTDs are just killing it. Gallo's got that High Noon product that they have, which is, in the billions now in terms of sales. It's just rocking things. And that's to a large extent why the spirits category looks pretty good right now. Excuse me. So I started with this as a conceptual framework to figure out where the opportunity was, and then I have this, which is a year by year look at U.S. legal drinking age, and so this is everybody in the U.S. year by year legal drinking age, and you can see where the boomer, Gen X, millennial, you can see all that where they are. You can see that the boomers are smaller than the millennial category at this point. And what I did was I took that first slide, I took this slide here and mixed it up with this slide here. And I ended up with this slide here. And so all I did was I just took out spirits and beer. And so I focused on just wine because I want to know where the opportunity is for wine. And what you can see is this one section right here. That's where we are. That's my generation. That's boomers. And you can see a very steep drop off. And I believe that drop off is something that happened probably in the late 90s, where in the early 90s, we had wine that premiumized. And we started premiumization. I hate the words, kind of a bastardized way to say something in the English language, but we started that whole trend, and it didn't take very long for the spirits companies to say, "Hey, we better make some expensive stuff too." And so you had Knob Creek and some of the other early ones come out in the late '90s, and they started down that path as well. But when my generation kind of hit that period of time where we were kind of electing which category we were going to go in, um, nothing else was good. Beer sucked and spirit sucked, but wine was good, and it was very reasonably priced. And on top of that, in the 90s, in particular, we had by the time we were in our 30s, that was one of the best economic growth engines that the country has ever seen. We had more growth in the 90s in the stock market than we had from all the prior years of the stock market combined. So it was a big, big boom, and that thing has kind of carried on. As everybody is probably aware, that the boomers still have the majority of the wealth in the U.S. So that still carries on, and of course, everybody also is aware that eventually, I don't like to say die, will sunset, and that stuff will get passed down. I'm hoping to not pass down anything. I'm hoping to buy really expensive bottles when and drink them all. That's what I'm going to do. So here you see where we are right now. But look over here, if we're going to roll off a high indexing consumer like me that drinks a nice bottle of wine every night. Where do we recover that? Well, it's the 30 to 45 year age band, and these are people that on any given day, they would consider drinking wine. It's right in their bailiwick. These are the ones that actually drink wine. They like wine, but they like everything. They drink across categories. So in theory, you could pull these guys over to your category, and that's our job. We have to figure out how to move them from beer and spirits, over back to the wine category. We have to figure out new ways to appeal to this group. This group right here is really critical for us to get laser focused on. Production channel. This goes back to how long is this going to last? I think everybody's aware of this. The last demand correction was 86 to 94, which I'm going to date myself, but I remember it. I was working at Bank of America at that time, and so I remember distinctly what happened when we had a demand correction. Not a oversupply from planting too much, but a real demand correction. It's a very different animal, as I think everybody is starting to figure out. And here we have the current correction. Interestingly, though, that last demand correction, it had kind of a similar vibe to it. The Mothers Against Drunk Driving and anti-alcohol groups were trying to figure out ways to lower the unhealthy impacts of alcohol consumption. And I have no problem. I bet you none of us here have any problem with figuring out how to have less unhealthy impact from alcohol. That's not what we really want. We want to have responsible drinking and healthy people, and from the products we produce. And so that's the last demand. And it was also happened to be the rotation out of my parents' generation, who are beer and spirits consumers, largely, not wine consumers. So it was very, very close to what we see today. The current correction, though, the difference is, we have the World Health Organization that has now coined a phrase that's sticking everywhere, which is there's no safe amount. And so they've gone from the unhealthy impact of wine or alcohol to characterizing all alcohol from the first drop as being unhealthy. And that's bullshit. Oh, sorry, I can't say bullshit. Oh, I said it again, but it is. This is where we are, the far right side, 2024, down about 3.5%. You see a plus or minus right around there and other analysts, but it's right about there. This is from Schenck and stuff. So this is an important slide on what's happening with wholesale. So wholesale started getting backed up. Really, it kind of happened and during COVID when we drank down the supply that we were oversupplied. You guys remember back in 2019 we were grossly oversupplied, and it was starting to back up. You can't quite see it; it's off the side of this chart. Um, but everybody quickly said, "Oh, look at all the demand. We got to increase our." So we took all of the bulk line again. Most of this is high production wineries, but they took the bulk of that and shoved it into bottles and then rushed it out to distributors, and then everything froze up. Actually, we started getting back to when we started to open up more more of a pattern we're used to. Um, and um, and then so we end up the very top line is inventory to sales ratio. It's the highest it's ever been at 1.7. That was the peak. There have been some that have predicted that this last year would be the year that we would see this come down. And we have some now that already have predicted that this year would be the year it would come down. And that's not happening. And it's not happening because retail sales are still not going in a positive direction. We got to see retail sales go that way. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like in a minute. Um, this is the data from SipSource. On the top is spirits, and you can see what happened during reopening from COVID. This is back from September 20 all the way out year to date to October. This last October, I should have updated it with a couple more data points, but it looks the same. We're in negative growth territory now for both spirits. Spirits felt very good about themselves coming out because they were growing while we were shrinking. I was really shocked at that. I predicted the opposite. I thought that we were going to be invited to the party too, and the celebration of getting out of COVID, and it turned out we weren't, and that the restaurants in particular didn't restock like they did on the spirits category. But after we started getting toward normalized business, you can see what happened to spirits. It started coming back down too. So it's the whole alcohol bev category that's impacted by this. Um, Now we seem to be at a point where we're bottoming out, but we're bottoming out in negative territory. We can't go on obviously continuing to have negative 7% growth because that's still down. Even though the growth rate is stopped, maybe it's slowed at a minimum. So that's the beginning of change right there. So that part of it is, even though it's negative, is actually a positive because we've actually been in this pattern now for a lot longer than people think. I actually eliminated a slide before this that I probably shouldn't have, but it showed that this actually started more like about 2016. And so when we think about how long is this going to last, we have to factor that in. We've actually been in it for a while. So it's not going to last maybe as long as people think, or I don't know how long people think if you took a vote what that would look like. But we're much farther through it than I think many would believe. Just looking at the whole supply chain, just the whole production supply, not bottles and grapes and things like that, but just the production of wine as a category. So orange is volume, green is dollars. So shipments is on the left. Let's see here. There we go. So that's shipments. Shipments are off, but that's stuff from GFA Consulting, Gomberg Frederickson. Off premise, this is Nielsen, is down 4. Volume, dollars is less. We're still seeing that. I think we're kind of at the end of that period where we're going to see having worse volumes than dollars. I think we're kind of at the point where we're not going to be able to see any kind of growth on the upside for most categories. On premise, you can see looks pretty close to off premise right now. Depletions, that's that last slide we looked where we were bottoming out, and it's negative. Everything as you look, sales, this is sales locations, just the number of retail sales locations, and that's down. And then this is the DTC stuff from Wine Business Analytics, and so they're tracking data from a few different sources, and they come up with negative volume and a little bit better growth, but it's still negative. And so that's DTC, and that was kind of our last holdout. Those that were in DTC were grateful they were. I'll tell you something. As I'm going through the data right now for the DTC survey, I mentioned already that it's about half that are growing still and half that are shrinking. So it's sometimes averages are a little bit you can kind of get fooled by them, especially if you include some big chunks on one side of it or the other. And so in this case, I think DTC is it's got some headwinds that we're not used to. We are seeing lower visitation, but the data comes from SOA ship compliance. So this is wine that's shipped from anywhere. It doesn't include grocery store, obviously. And so you have to, get by shipping costs and things like that. It's not a bad comp for what we do. It's the best one we have actually right now. But I think probably for us, as I look at our financial statements, it's not quite as bad as this. We see in our financial statement database, it's about half that are growing and half that are shrinking at different levels, matching what we saw in visitation actually. Okay, so this is a chart that I did myself. You probably can't tell, but I was trying to explain to somebody, why I've come up with the predictions that I've got about how long is it going to last. Well, I started to say, well, that distribution backlog, wholesale distribution backlog, it's not moving, and so that's going to take a year to climb out, and then the retail's got to move first before you're going to see, the other start to improve. And then so I was trying to figure out a way for people to understand it. So you guys probably, if you drive around the West anywhere, you probably got stuck out somewhere in a flat place, maybe like Nevada, and got to a crossing gate, and you were waiting while the train went by, and the train was like 3 miles long. You just turn your car off and you just wait. But when a rail car that long starts to go, the engine goes, and the caboose doesn't go for a really long time because there's these gaps that kind of spread out. So you hear when something pulls out like that, you hear ka-chunk, 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 and then there's that gap that widens between the cars, and then finally 3 minutes later you get to the caboose. And so that's in the same way, that's kind of the slack and wiggle room that we've had that is, more or less been removed at this point. So this is what ends up happening is you end up as the engine now is slowing, all of that slack gets taken out, and there's no more wiggle room anymore. You can't push things around, and so especially right now. Let's see, I don't know if I have that. Yeah. So especially right now, what happens is any kind of slowdown that happens in retail is translated back immediately to producers and growers. You feel that really fast. So on the other side, we're going to see retail repair itself ahead of what we're going to feel like. And so that'll happen, maybe a little quicker than people might otherwise think. So you have to be a little bit aware of how this will show itself, how it's going to clean itself up. And so that's the data point I'm looking for. I want to see when we're having overall, maybe it's DTC, maybe it's retail, but when we start to see green again, that's what we call green shoots. When we start to see that part go, now we're nearing the end. but we're going to have to still get a while because we've shoved all that wiggle room out, and then so everybody in the middle now that's making those decisions is going to expand their wiggle room again, and it'll just be a little bit slower. They're not going to jump in and buy from producers right away. We're still going to have to work with some discounting and other stuff at all price points for a little while. So this is we're coming to the end, and I'm just reflecting on the differences in consumers, my generation versus everybody else. Honestly, everybody under 60. But so consumer choice then and now. So this is this is what we have on the left is wine, beers. I mean, you got anything you can possibly imagine that's in this. The choices that we have today are incredible. They're just all over the map, and they've merged together. Uh, RTDs are an example. Nobody knows where the alcohol came from in the RTD. Well, it turns out most of it's from spirits, but it can be from wine, and some is. But it's all in the RTD category. In the end, I don't think the consumer cares where that alcohol comes from. But it is an entry point into consuming. And right now they're looking for things like, ease of opening, just the value in a small serving. You don't have to make a $35 investment to see if you like it, that kind of thing. So RTDs continue to take off, and that tells you where the consumer right now is pointed. Here's another one. So, back in the day, we get a restaurant. Can I see the wine list, please? And, you have the lid, you can stare at it for about an hour, trying to figure out what you're going to buy. And that's the way it was. It's a lot easier now. Nobody's got that time mentally or otherwise to make those kind of decisions. And so now we have beverage lists. And the wine list looks like this in most places, even in good restaurants. Fine wine historically. This is the kind of thing that we see. It's just really been reduced. So this is me and AI. I figured out how to use AI. And so if you look here, here's then, and here then is, I like to say this is me, very handsome man. But he's either a two-fisted drinker or he's got three arms, because I don't know if you noticed, but there's that's like AI does this. It's just like makes extra arms, or you never know. And then over here, here's a bowl of weed. It's one more distraction for a younger consumer. But if you look at all the glasses just hanging out there, there's five people. I don't know. I think I counted 9 glasses, something like that. So that'll help if they're two-fisted drinkers, and they got 3 arms. That'll help all of this. So that's kind of a then and now as well. Health perceptions. We had the French paradox, the J-shaped curve, the Arthur Klatsky Mediterranean diet. Those were health cues that taught our generation to actually lean in to especially wine, because of the if you're going to drink, the health impacts are better in wine, and that still is true, by the way, despite the other chatter that you see. Moderate consumption still extends, and this is what the reports came out in January from the government. One said wine's going to, or alcohol's going to kill you. The other one said that it extends your life. It literally did, and that's actually been there. That piece of information has been there since the 20s. But the anti-health group is doing everything they can to shut. It's very inconvenient from them when you're trying to get them when they're trying to get all of us to just stop, drinking alcohol. Period. That whole notion that actually it extends your life is very, they'll do anything they can really to get rid of it, and they're doing a very good job at that. So this is where we are today, and it just, like I said, it's BS. This is going back to when I was younger, coming up, my 30s, trying wine, very nice. And today, I never thought I'd see this, but new consumers are experimenting with cocktails. They'll have cocktails and not wine with the meal. So that's a difference too. This was what I thought was fun when I was just learning about wine. I like this woman with the black shirt in the bottom picture. I don't know if you guys can see her, but she's got her pen there and she's writing her notes. You don't see anybody do that anymore. That's nobody thinks that way. We thought that was fun. We thought education was fun, and taking that time out is just different now. Here's what a younger consumer thinks is fun. Here's shuffleboard and it's alcohol food places. Here's axe throwing. And I always thought axe throwing and alcohol didn't go together, but apparently they do. So this is I've never been. I'm a little bit anxious to go. I don't trust anybody's throwing. Some other places, this is a darts place. It's not as bad as the axe, but it's close. I don't know where people are going to throw sharp objects. Ping pong's a little safer. These are all chains, by the way. And then this just the mixologists now. They're not bartenders. They're mixologists. They're far more sexy now, mixologists than bartenders. And they're entertaining. Fire and all sorts of stuff. It's entertaining, and the younger consumers looking for fun. And here's another one. This is in Minnesota in the winter. It's curling. It's I don't know that people think it's that fun because there's nobody on the curling lanes or court or whatever they call it. I've never done it. Okay, so when we talk about tomorrow, so we're going to have uh, we'll get back to being balanced in supply and demand. We're not going to see the same kind of growth that my generation pushed out for 25 years. We're not going to bounce that way because we don't have the population size to do that. Either if you're going to be a consuming country, you have to have either native births or immigration. You have to have immigration could fix it too. We could have more immigrants, but we don't have that obviously. I figured Republic recovery for our group would probably be between 27 and 29, where we get back to flat. And I think that's probably still a good growth. It might be toward the closer end of that. It might be closer to 27 than 29. So we'll come out of it, I think, earlier. We're going to see fewer wineries. It'll happen through consolidation. Physical wineries don't really go away. It's not like you could take a car wash and turn it into a bar. It's single purpose facilities, and there's always somebody out there that, oh, I just want to be in the wine business. So we'll always have a certain number of physical wineries, and I don't think those will go away. But we're seeing consolidation, and I know it's under the hood. I know we have some bankruptcies that are coming up that'll be in the papers in the next month. There's some more stuff to hear, and it's part of consolidation. By 2030, the 35 to 50, 35 to 45, I should have said, age consumer, they have to be the center of attention. And interestingly, when people start to think about how to structure things in the tasting room, what kind of experiences do you want? And trying to appeal to me, guess what? I like hanging out with the young people. I like seeing what they're doing. That's fun for me. I live I see. I remember doing that kind of stuff. I live vicariously through them. So, if you're going to have fun, if you're going to throw axes or darts or whatever at your tasting room, I'll be there. I'll be there to see what. Of course, now I have grandkids, so that pulled me back into that group too. But serve them, and I'll come along. Is my message. We'll see what happens to pricing and volume. It should drop on both counts, and that's just part of the way that we attract a new consumer. I just for us, I think what's probably going to happen is we'll have more removals from the higher production areas like Fresno, and probably we'll see maybe that higher production stuff move more toward Lodi. And so I think what we're going to end up with is probably better wine in lower price bottles. And that's something that we need. We need that on ramp again. And Napa's a little bit different. Napa's in and of itself, there's only one Napa. There's only so many acres they're planted, and so Napa's kind of traded more like diamonds than anything else. And so I don't expect to see giant drops in land prices, or we are seeing drops in bottle prices, but that's happening by taking juice and putting it in bottles that nobody recognizes and putting it in Trader Joe's and moving it out that way. So that's still discounting. It's just that people are protecting brands. That's the right way to do it. Investors will start coming out early once everybody sees any kind of movement in either DTC or retail. Money sitting on and parked on the sidelines. They'll be back. They'll be back and looking to put money back into this business, and it'll start going again. And so this is what I leave everybody with: is what are you going to do to attract that 30 to 45 consumer? That's got to be everybody's laser focus. And as I've gone through and looked at I did something really interesting. I think it's interesting this year, and in the direct to consumer survey, is I asked some open-ended questions like, what's the strategy that's working for you? For instance, how are you attacking that 30 to 45 year segment? And I let everybody write down whatever they're going to write down. Now, in the past, there's no way to actually analyze that. Well, guess what? You got AI now, and you can. And so I've finished the document. We're calling it a success guide, and we're only giving it to the respondents as a thank you. We're not going to release it publicly, but it's got fascinating information in it about what people are in the industry are doing. And one of the things that comes out loud and clear is fun. That the tasting room experience has to be more than that woman that was writing the notes down there. I should have. Sorry, I should have closed out my Teams. But it's got to be more than that. People are looking for something fun to do. And one data point from, I think it was Bain, was that the older generation post COVID is looking to make up for lost time with family, and so they're being more regional in the way that they travel. The younger generation, on the other hand, they know now that life is short, and they're not going to waste time, and so they want to go do as many different things as they can. And the key word in there is different. So you start to lose if you don't change up what you're doing all the time and give an excuse for people to come in one form or another. Then they come once, but they may not come that second time because they've been there. All right. Sorry about that. So anyways, that's the whole thing. Now I'm going to stop sharing so that I don't have something embarrassing come up on this thing. Say somebody's cussing me out on the text or something. I don't know.
Rob, that was really wonderful. Thank you so much for all the fabulous information. I see that there is hope and maybe some light at the end of the tunnel that we're approaching, which is really nice to see. We'll go ahead and open it up to any questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can type it into the chat, or you can simply unmute yourself, and that works okay too.
No, I'm not going to tell you how old I am.
I love it. No, that's great. I think one of my questions is, there seems to be a little bit of a hesitancy with trying something new and perhaps trying to attract this market that I think you've been actually talking about for several years now. And it feels like just go ahead and try something. And, in your direct to consumer research and talking with other wineries, are you seeing that thought process start to change? Are people starting to try to do different things now to try to make some headway with this group? What have you been seeing out there?
Yeah, that's why I put those open-ended questions in the survey this year, because that's what I asked. What are you doing to attract that group? Where are you having success? And so we've torn that apart now. Just finished the document. It's in marketing right now, getting prettied up. But the data are all there, and what it supports is the wineries that are having more success. I mean, there's the ones that are having more than others, and the ones that are having more success are changing up what they're doing in the tasting room. They are starting to focus more on fun, a different kind of fun. They're trying to figure out ways, more focused ways to get that consumer in. One of the things I said, and actually in the success guide that's done now, is that when you're trying to figure out what to do, rather than think about what you have experience with, look at where younger consumers are. Look at the things that they want to do, and if you can, plant yourself in those kind of experiences, do that. If you can bring that into your own property, do that. I also think that we have to be really careful about the way that we just overly dependent on the tasting room. That's what we do, and so we have to continue with that. But in addition, we have all this opportunity that's out across the U.S., and we have regions in everybody's portfolio where we're better than other. We might be better in Utah. I have one client that is really strong in Utah. Uh, uh, they found a place where there wasn't a lot of fine wine producers, and obviously none, or not very many. I guess there is one at least. But they're doing very well there, and it could be Des Moines, it could be Florida, it could be anywhere. You pick that place and you expand your brand, you build your brand regionally there. Versus generally is a shotgun approach. You narrow it down, and data ends up being one of those things that really is important, and that can help us identify that stuff, and help us make decisions in a more refined way.
Yeah, that's great. Jackie had a question and she said, can you speak to wine club member benefits? Are these still important, or with new generation, are they not as important, or are they not opting in? Any recommendations or tips for solid wine club strategy?
Yeah, so they're important, but too long. We just said, okay, well, you can have a free visit. You're gonna pick your thing. But if somebody's in Minnesota, they don't care about a free visit. They're going to come out once this year at best. And so one of the things that I'm encouraging people to do is to think about building a community. Think about, if you're going to have a party at your house, what do you do? Just invite the first 5 or 10 people that can come? If you're a good host, you probably sit there and think how people are going to get along. Do you have a right wing and a left wing that are all going to chew each other up, or are you going to think about who you're going to bring in? So we have a tendency to believe our communication is up and down. It's from us to them, but you have to encourage a way so that it's this way. Referral sources are the way that people, younger people, make discoveries, and they make them very fast, by the way, with phones and such. But encouraging that lateral discussion, I think, is one of the keys. One of the things that we can do to make that consumer feel like they're included, and when they find their friends that are doing it, and that becomes a routine. You're going to go to this place because it's fun. Now you're going with your friends. It's not just about what's going on. It's not just about the wine. Yeah, it's about the wine and it's about the fun, but it's about going with your friends. And nobody's going to want to jump out of a program if their friends are going and they're enjoying that. So I think that's one of the sticky points that we're not really good at doing yet. We're still thinking communications this way too much.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That was a great answer. Nancy asks, can you address down tourism in Napa? Is it directly related to lower sales or vice versa? Do you think hotel prices will come down to attract visitors?
It's a market. And so, business people are going to make rational decisions. If nothing's selling, they'll figure out whatever it is to improve that sale. And price is one of them. It's not the only thing, but it's one of them. Excuse me. Visitation is down in my mind because, in my generation is kind of, as I say, they're sunsetting. And so they're probably not going to do what they did in their 30s. I can't drink like I did in my 30s. I can still drink just fine. But I choose to drink in lower amounts now. So I'm going to see my grandkids next week. They're in Australia. That's where I'm going. Going to a tasting room, going anywhere, is you think twice about it. It's got to have a different purpose. And I think, those younger consumers, are available there. And, but the visitation is dropping because it's both generations that are starting to weed themselves away from it for different reasons. And so we have to attack both of those strategies to, I don't know if we have to retain the visitation, especially if you take the experience on the road, like I was talking about, you can make up for it there. We can't ever get away from the direct to consumer business and what we do in our tasting rooms. That's what we do. But we have to expand that because that'll make up for lost visitors. And yes, we will see hotel prices come down and wine prices in some cases. We'll find ways to on ramp those younger consumers that are at a more effective price point. That's coming in. It's actually started.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today with the Yountville Chamber of Commerce for our April webinar. The presentation was fantastic. This will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to share this with your other colleagues. And thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again.